Joining me now to discuss this, Director of Migrant Watch UK, Dr. Mike Jones. Mike, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
It's interesting that he talked about extending this initiative. So are these buoys already in use anywhere that we know of in the Channel?
Well, yeah, the French have actually used this before on, estuaries inland. They've been used in the United States, in Texas, and they are reasonably effective inland, sort of rivers, waterways, canals, estuaries. But obviously, with regards to the migration crisis on the English Channel, this will only make differences at the margin. I don't think it's a silver bullet, but if this can be extended in any way, and it'll have an impact on numbers, then I'm completely open to what Mr. Jenrick is suggesting.
I think when we read the story or when we see the details of the story, we kind of imagine this, 40-mile-long buoy stretching across the Channel, going that way, so that anything coming across at a certain point can't go any further. But of course, there are obvious limitations with that. It's a very busy waterway. Other vessels need to use the place.
Well, yeah, precisely. Obviously, it's not a particularly good option in the high seas. The English Channel is one of the, busiest shipping straits in the world, particularly the Dover Strait. So it's very impractical in, the high seas. But inland, I think it's a great option. And if the French can do more in this respect, then, more power to their elbow.
I don't know where the Prime Minister is on this. Of course, him and Mr. Jenrick are not great bedfellows at the moment. But bearing in mind that Rishi Sunak said, look, one of my key pledges, stop the boats. He stood there in front of the podium thing with stop the boats written there. It's still up there on the Tory website. One of his key pledges, stop the boats. And in the absence of anything else, because we know we've had 1,500 people that we know of that have come across this year so far, and we're only about half an hour into this year, so it's not looking good already, Mike. So you might think maybe Rishi Sunak will go, do you know what, it's not the best idea, but let's give it a go.
For sure. If it can make difference at the margins, then they should definitely explore this and try and increase cooperation with the French. But at the end of the day, they're not getting to the root cause of the Channel migration crisis, which is, the Human Rights Act. They haven't amended or abolished it. The key question in illegal migration policy is this: if somebody arrives in your country illegally, can you deport them? Now, for some national groups, you can deport them. And Prime Minister Sunak has done this with the Albanians. But many of these migrants come from countries that are deemed unsafe. And, the Human Rights Act is interpreted very strictly.
Yeah.
And the bar is set very high for what's deemed an unsafe country. So, if you're from Afghanistan or Iran or Iraq, it's very difficult to deport you to your country of origin. And, ultimately, that's the root cause of it. The Rwanda plan, of course, tries to circumnavigate this. But the Safety of Rwanda bill has many potential pitfalls, because although it does try to disapply sections of the Human Rights Act, it doesn't go far enough.
Yeah, and Mr. Sunak's likely to get another kick in the teeth in the House of Lords this week on that very point. It's worth, his defence might well be that, look, I didn't say I could literally stop everything, but I could reduce it. And he might take some comfort in that. Let's remind ourselves what the Prime Minister said when it comes to the boats crossing the Channel.
I will not rest until the boats are stopped. With grip and determination, the government can fix this. And we are using every tool at our disposal.
Yeah, I don't dispute for 1 second, Mike, that there are lots of people working very hard. I remember speaking to a very senior Home Office official not long ago on this, and he said, he almost wishes they were making a documentary following what they do. He said it's never ending. We're at it all day, all night, trying to solve this thing, but we need help from elsewhere, like the French. Mr. Sunak could take some comfort in the fact that I mentioned that figure of 1,500 this year so far. That's a lot of people to come into a country who should not be here. but it is slightly down on last year. Is that any consolation for the Prime Minister?
Not really, because it's slightly up on 2022, but the numbers overall for 2022 were higher than last year. So I don't think you should read too much into that. I mean, in that clip that you just showed, Mr. Sunak said that he's using every tool at his disposal. And, to be fair, he's got, a returns agreement with the Albanian government. He's got more cooperation with the Turkish government, but he hasn't addressed the root cause. The thing is, to solve illegal immigration, power and responsibility have to be aligned. But the system we have at the moment is topsy-turvy. The people who are responsible for, illegal migration policy or asylum policy are the Home Office and the civil servants who are there to assist government ministers. They're responsible for that, but they have no power.
Yeah.
The power lies with the courts and the lawyers, but they're not responsible to, the general public. They're not running elections. They don't have manifesto promises, but they actually have, the power to make these decisions. And because of the Human Rights Act, which enshrines the European Convention of Human Rights into British law, and that enshrines the principle of what they call non-refoulement, which means you cannot deport somebody to a country that's deemed unsafe. That makes it almost impossible to fulfill your democratic promises.
Which is, I think we'll look back at this in years to come. Students of politics in 50 years will be scratching their heads. They did what? They couldn't do what? It would be extraordinary, because unless we haven't solved it by then, which I'm quite willing to believe is also possibly the case. Listen, Mike, always great to gauge your views on these things. Thank you, Dr. Mike Jones. He is, of course, Executive Director at Migrant Watch UK.